Hey again, JR with Warrior House DIY. So today we're building custom-made shelves, storage shelves. Anybody can go and get a closet system designed for them by California Closets and all the other readily available companies that are out there. That's why you came to Warrior House DIY, because you're going to do this yourself. So all the materials, all the tools used in this video are going to be in the links down below, even some video descriptions for those who don't know how to use those tools. But we're going to be using 3/4 inch maple plywood, readily available at pretty much all hardware stores, and then the closet hardware is also available at pretty much all hardware stores. I'll show you how to measure this out, measuring for your closet space, whatever it is that you need to come up with. It could be storage room, it could be a closet in your bedroom. It's all the same really at the end of the day, it's just fitting the pieces together. So we're gonna slice up the maple into the size that's required for our system. We're gonna edge band it with this pre-glued birch edge banding. Simply iron it on, roll it on, and trim it with this trimmer. So let's get into it. Before we get into the design, you should know that all the timestamps are going to be down below for the different segments of this video. Design your space to fit your needs. In this video, we're doing wall-to-wall shelving, but the concept is the same. We started with a blank sketch of our closet so that we could get accurate measurements from wall to wall, so that we knew how long we needed to cut our shelves and exactly how much material we needed to buy for all of our hanging brackets. A lot of the big box hardware stores are going to sell a variety of sizes and pre-finished shelving, similar to this blonde maple or painted white, or even a dark mahogany type finish. And that's something you may consider if you don't think that you can do the finish yourself or you don't have the ability to. But hang on, a little bit later on, I'm going to show you how to apply the finish in a way that's really easy, extremely low odor. It can even be done indoors. When it comes to cutting shelves, we chose to use our track saw. In my opinion, this is the easiest way to get straight line cuts without moving heavy sheets of plywood across a table saw. Now, if you don't have a track saw, you could always use a circular saw with a straight edge. It's going to do the same thing. I will mention though, if you're working in a small space like a garage or maybe even inside of an apartment or a condo building, and you have a track saw such as this Wen track saw or maybe a Festool one hooked up to a dust extractor or a vacuum cleaner, you will significantly reduce the amount of sawdust in the air. Though I don't recommend cutting inside a condo or an apartment building, it is doable. In our case, the mounting hardware that we chose was right at 12 inches. We set up our cuts to be 11 and 15/16 of an inch. That gave us 4 equal shelves out of a 4x8 sheet of plywood. We only made 3 cuts in each sheet. We had 5 sheets going here. We can chop up the length a little bit later on, but let's get into the edge banding and sanding process now. All right, so when you're ironing on your edge banding, it's a simple close iron that you're going to use for this process. If you want to grab one that you're going to be using this for, if you're only using it for this, you can get these for like $9 or $10, something like that at the hardware store. But again, set it to the hottest setting. It gets hot pretty quick. We're going to set it off to the side where it's not in the way of anything that's flammable, not going to burn ourselves, and we're not going to lean into it. The first section that I'm going to put down this edge banding is going to be the most important area to pay attention to. This is an 8-foot strip of edge banding, and it's not really that intimidating. It's just that when you first put it down, using the hot iron on that glue and warming that glue up, it activates quickly. You want to just make sure it's straight. So I kind of start off with about 8 inches to a foot, something like that, and get that set in place. From there, you can hold off about 10 to 20 inches at a time and just kind of run your iron across it, basically keeping a finger on each side of the plywood as we move down with this edge banding. You can see it's not a very hard process. It's going to be wavy, right? It's going to be wavy up and down. I don't care about that. Side to side is what's important. And we're just activating the glue at this point. The iron is nice and hot. You can kind of feel it as you go along, that the glue stays sticky and tacky. Like I said, it's going to be wavy up and down, so we want to come back with our roller and roll it down. You can use your hand if you need to, if you want to, but it is hot, so I recommend using a roller. It makes life a little bit easier. Save your hands, especially if you're going to be doing couple hundred linear feet of edge banding like we are today in this one. Now we come to the end here, and there's a little bit overhanging. It's kind of hard to see in the camera shot, but that's because we measured a little long, right? All you gotta do is just push it down, and it'll snap right there against the edge of your piece. This glue is almost cured and dried already at this point. We want to obviously let it have as much time to fully cure. But now we're going to take our trimming tool and just trim by hand. So we're just squeezing down here. This blade is just taking all of that edge banding excess off right there. So we're just about through this second stack of shelves here, and I thought that I would slow down the time lapse to actually go through this a little bit more in detail for you guys. Here's the deal. At the end of the day, we're just putting edge banding on plywood. Now, I might make it look a little simple because I've been doing it for a long time, but I really want you to know that you really can do this. It's not that hard. I'm starting off with the iron, just like I mentioned before, right? I'm gonna start off with just the first 6 or 8, 10 inches, something like that. That's ultimately the most important point, right? Because that's our starting point, and we want to get that set in place. But, you know, as I heat and I roll, I go along, 10 or 20 inches at a time. But it's also worth noting, if you don't have a roller and you don't want to burn your hands, that you can actually just push down with the iron. You don't have to give a lot of pressure. Depending on the edge banding that you get and the vendor you use, where you get it from, all the glues are a little bit different. But for the most part, they heat up pretty quick and they set up pretty quickly as well. So I'm going to show you guys on this piece how I'm not even going to really roll it. I'm just going to go along the whole 8 feet of it. And I'm being careful with my, my right hand over here that's not holding the iron to guide the edge banding onto the plywood so that I'm kind of feeling for a little bit of overlap on each edge of this edge banding so that I have a little overhang all the way down it, right? Now I just pushed down lightly with the iron, but I could go back now really with my hands and do it. I like to use, the roller, so I'm gonna finish it off with the roller. And it's another thing that's worth noting is that the roller is really gonna give it a much more professional finish than just simply using your hands. So let's burn through a couple more of these. I'll show you guys the trimmer too. That's another tip that I wanted to point out is that once you get down to the end here, you cut off this little bit of excess and you're ready to use your trimmer. Again, these are all fairly the same. You can get them even at a lot of different hardware stores will carry these things, but once you've gotten your purchase point here, or once you've gotten your initial rip, so to speak, you can hear that in the microphone there, on your edge banding, you don't want to let off that squeezy grip at all. You just want to keep squeezing that grip and run it all the way down. You might run into a snag here and there, but don't let off, because then at the end of it, you're going to be able to feel that you got the whole thing in one shot. Time saver, right? Time is money. If you're planning on turning this into a business, obviously you got to pay a little bit more attention to the edge banding and making sure that everything's perfectly proper. But I will say that it's a fairly simple process even for the DIYer to do this, and it can save you a whole lot of money when you're building your closet systems. Let's go ahead and finish all this out. Last board, we're going to go start to finish on this one and show you guys exactly what I was telling you about, the whole process, right? The first 8-10 inches are the most important. This one's going to wiggle off. We can't get it straight. So we're just going to tap it with the iron, just like that. Then you can actually peel it up. It's wet glue. You'll see it. You'll see that glue right there. And now that's in place. That's exactly where we want it. Now we can just work ourselves all the way along it with the iron. Now again, if you don't have a roller, you can do this with just the iron itself, and maybe even come back after a full length of 8 feet, and it's not too hot to push down with your hand. I'm gonna tell you guys though, the roller really makes the difference. Gives it that real professional finish, which is what you're going for, right? You're saving all the money by doing this project yourself, but you still want it to look like it was made in the factory. All right, so we got the roller coming down, and then I'm going to show you guys the last trick to a good clean edge with our trimmer tool. Again, all the links down below for every tool used in this entire video and on this entire project. Let's get this rolled out.
I'll do the back.
Okay, and then we got Brendan down here is going to snap off the end for us. Again, if you just give that little snap at the end of that, you'll get a perfect 90-degree cut on there. Start you off. Now you got your trimmer tool. It's got arrows on it that tell you which direction to go. And we're going to go ahead and start squeezing on there. But here's the thing. You want to keep it clean. That's the secret. So if you come back and you got all of this junk, all that little shavings that's coming off in there, that's good. It means you got a good cut. But if you feel it and it's not exactly the way you want it to be, go ahead, clean that tool out, and this last run is really smooth, but you can hear it. You just get a little bit more of a skim coat on there. It's going to give you that clean, finished edge. Now you're ready to go and put your finish on this and slice it up if you need to into whatever length shelves that you're going to work with. We'll show you guys when we install the closet what we're doing with that. All right, once we've finished cutting and edge banding our shelves, we're going to want to give them a quick sanding just to knock down any sharp edges or anywhere where the edge banding might have a little bit of glue that's smushed out on that. So a quick tip on sandpaper. I recommend buying by the full sheet and making them the size that you need. In this case, I'm going to be using quarter sheets. If you're at the big box stores, you're going to be able to find the 3-packs. You might even be able to find these pro packs anywhere between 10 and 20 sheets per pack. You can also get these online. There'll be a link down below for that. But today we're going to be using quarter sheets, and why am I doing that? Well, for me, I'm using the foam sanding blocks. Many of you have probably bought these. I recommend not throwing them out. Why? Because after they're dulled down and they're not useful as a sanding block anymore, they're great when you take a quarter sheet. Let's go ahead and cut these up and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we've got a quarter sheet, and a sanding block fits just about perfectly enough to wrap up the edges just a little bit. Now, you've got a little extra sanding on the side edges here that you can use, depending on if you're getting into a corner or not. You can slide this pad back and forth, as you can see here, from top to bottom, to give yourself a little bit more of a sharper edge going against the inside of a cabinet if you were doing such. In this case today, we're going to be simply sanding up these edges, knocking down the sharp stuff and the glue on these shelves as we previously talked about. So, got this edge banded edge right here. Again, just knocking it down. All we're going to want to do is just simply come across on an angle. Watch this, guys. It's really simple. If you run back and forth, you run the risk of catching an edge of any kind of burrs that might have been sticking up. In this case, when you're going across it on an angle, you typically avoid that risk of catching a splinter and pulling up the edge, or pulling up the edge of your edge banding, which is even worse, right? Now you got to reattach it, break out the iron. Well, in this case, we're going to avoid all that. Just simply going across on an angle, and you can see we've already smoothed down our edge. It's nice and smooth. It's factory finish. We're going to finish up all of these shelves, and then we're going to go ahead and show you how to roll some clear coat on them. Quick, easy, you'll be done in a day. All right, well, we're just about done here. We're sanding our last board, and I wanted to take this moment to recap a couple things for you. I understand that people watching this video are from all different skill levels. So if you are an expert at sanding, then great, go ahead and skip on to the next section. We get into the finish. But otherwise, if you're more of a beginner and you hear yourself saying, I can't do that, the expression I can't just simply means that you haven't done it yet. And I know you can, and that's why I'm going to teach you step by step, really simple, how to break this down, right? So we've already gone through cutting our shelf boards and then edge banding them. We talked about ironing them on, and we trimmed them down with this edge band trimmer after we ironed them on. As you saw, when I'm sanding them, sometimes I feel there's a little bit more of a lip hanging off there that I don't really want, so I just grab this trimmer tool again and just go ahead and run it quickly over it. This is really simple, guys. This tool is made to be used by anybody of all different skill levels. It's spring-loaded, and that's for a reason. You can see in a second here, and it's got an arrow pointing on it for the direction that you want to trim in. So you're gonna put it on the edge of your shelf, just like that. Slap it down on there, and you're gonna squeeze together. You're gonna hold that squeeze. This is where you get your hand workout, right? And then as you squeeze, just start to run it onto the board. You'll feel the edges of the knife start to cut in. You can even hear it a little bit in the microphone there, into the little edge of the lip of the edge banding that's hanging over. Just keep that squeeze on there the whole way and run it all the way down the board. So you'll see, if I can zoom in on this one for you guys here, there's a little tiny bit of shavings, nothing much, just a little bit of sawdust coming off of that. That's all it was, just a little bit extra. Now we're back onto the sandpaper. Something else I wanted to point out, this is 20 boards that we've been working on here, this being the last one, right? We started with 5 sheets of plywood, we cut it down evenly into quarters, so we've got 4 shelves out of each one. We can chop these up later into the lengths that we need for the finished shelves, but what I want to point out is the sandpaper, right? I said you could start off with a full sheet, get the, the Pro Pack, it's a better deal for you guys, and then break it down into quarter sheets that you can use with your foam sanding pad here. This is what I've been doing, as you've seen in this video. Now, this is approximately what, with double edges that we're sanding here, right? This is what, 320 linear feet of sanding. I'm on one sheet. I'm on the last quarter of that sheet, but I will point out that as I'm going to sand this last sheet here, remember what I was saying for all you DIY beginners out there, new to sanding. We're sanding on an angle, right? We're not going on a sharp edge. We do that, we're going to start to burn a hole in our sandpaper here. When you go on an angle like this, as you guys can see, I'm going to finish off this sheet. Since I already ran my edge banding tool down it, there's not a whole lot more that I really need to take off of it. Just give it a quick knock. That's all we're looking to do, is to knock down that sharp edge, make it a little bit smoother. Nobody wants to scrape their knuckles when they're putting books up on a shelf, right? Well, in this case, I'm about to finish this sheet off here. One full sheet of sandpaper, 320 linear feet. It's all about the pressure. So keep it really simple, right? One sheet of sandpaper coming out of the Pro Pack here. This is a 20 pack that I've used, and you guys, even with doing professional woodworking, these sheets will last you a tremendous amount of time. You want to use the right grit. In this case, I was using 180 grit. You're going to always want to work through the coarseness of your sandpaper. 100 grit, 180 grit, 220 grit, maybe 360 grit, somewhere in there, depending on how smooth you need to be before the finish that you're putting on. In this case, guys, one sheet of 180 grit, right? We've cut it down into quarter sheets using this old foam sanding sponge that's no longer good for sanding, but it's a great sanding block. It's easy on your hands. If you want to use a hard wooden block, that's fine. You're going to burn through the paper a little bit faster. This is just a light sanding to knock down the sharp edges. That's all we're doing with these shelves. You're about to save yourself, what, a couple $1,000s by building your own shelves for your closet. The last thing you want to do is go and burn up some of that profit by buying a whole bunch of sandpaper and burning through a whole bunch of sandpaper. So again, one sheet of sandpaper, 320 linear feet. If you use the right pressure with this sponge, you can apply it. And remember, just saying I can't do it means that you haven't done it. You can do it. Let's show you how we're going to finish this off with clear coat. All right, we've spent the better part of our day cutting our plywood down into shelf boards, edge banding them, sanding them down, and getting them ready for the most exciting part now, which is the clear coat finish. This is going to do two things. One, the obvious is it's going to protect the wood, it's going to seal the wood, give it some scratch resistance, and two, which I think is more important, it's going to make the wood look beautiful. We've just saved all of this time and money by doing these shelves ourselves for our closet system. Now we're going to make it look beautiful, and it's going to have our signature on it. It's going to have your signature on it when you are finished doing this. So a product that is very readily available at most big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, things like that, is going to be by a company called Minwax. You've probably seen this company if you've done some staining projects. If you're familiar with this product, then I need to say no more, but if you're not, that's what I'm going to talk about right now. This is called Polycrylic. It's poly Polycrylic. So this is going to be a water-based product. It's not going to be harmful. It's going to be low, if not no, VOCs. You're not going to have to worry about wearing a mask while you're working with this product. I always recommend that you follow whatever the safety guidelines are on the product that you're using, but in this case, it's going to be a very mild product, very low odor to work with here. Always give it a good stir when you get a product fresh out of the can, or if you've just come from the store like I have, you're able to shake this thing up on your own. You don't really have to do a whole lot of stirring to it. So guys, with polycrylic, it's going to look kind of milky white. That's when it's going to go on. It's going to have this translucence kind of effect to it. When it dries, it is clear. In this case, we're going with the gloss finish, and that is simply because I already started applying with a previous can that was already gloss. But you could use satin or flat if you wanted to. We'll talk about this product in another video about all the other versatility to it as far as pigmenting it, coloring it, and using it for different projects. But right now, today, we're going to just get some clear coat on here. Now, we've got 20 shelves to do, which means we're going to be doing the top and the bottom and the edge on all of these. So how are we going to manage this in, say, a garage or in a studio apartment if that's where you're doing it? Well, quite simply, I'm going to show you guys this area that I'm working in right here is not much bigger than maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Now, 8-foot plywood, you want to have a little bit of room for moving around with this, but I'm going to show you guys what you could do with simple construction horse setup. In my case, behind me, I'm going to be using my workbench as one set of horses, and in front of me I've got my Bora centipede, which is just a fancy shop table. It sets up about 6 feet by 4 feet, so I can put a sheet of plywood on it, and that's what I'm going to be doing. If you're doing this on your own, I recommend just getting a couple sets of horses, running a couple 2x4s across them, and you'll see what I'm going to do. After I finish one board, I'm going to simply turn as if it was on a 2x4. In my case, I'm using a little bit more than a 2x4, right? And I'm just going to set it down off the side. I'm going to do the next board and set it down, and the next board and set it down. I'm going to work this way until I've gotten about maybe 8 or 10 of them done, and then I'm going to start to move those out of the way as they dry and start the next process over. So let's get going on the first one here and show you guys the application process. Again, we're going to be using the Minwax Polycrylic, but this application process is the same that can be used for even the higher quality professional grade products like this General Finishes high performance top coat. This will be available at more of your specialty woodworking stores like a Woodcraft or even possibly on Amazon. See if we can get a link for you guys down below for that. I'm going to say when you get into the higher quality stuff though, we're really going to recommend using a sprayer HVLP. Check out the links below for another video on that. But let's get into the Minwax Polycrylic. Simple guys, 4 or a 6-inch microfiber roller. That's the big secret to it right there. And give this thing a quick pour right into our tray. We're not using a big tray here because it's a smaller job. We'll give the thing a quick pour there and make sure you got your spill protection set up. Everybody's got their own preference on how they roll. When it comes down to it, it's just like rolling a wall. I like to drag a little paint or finish up the ramp here and just slowly push it back down the ramp as we get it off that roller there. Now this first roll is going to be soaking up a lot into this microfiber roller here, but we're just going to want to get the finish on the board. Nothing fancy to it, just rolling it back and forth. The reason I say just get the finish on the board is because this first coat is going to get soaked into the wood relatively quickly. I mean, you can almost do a few passes and it's already starting to dry up. Now, depending on where you are in the country, humidity is going to be an issue. Humidity and temperature affect your dry time. Higher humidity is going to prolong your dry time. Higher temperatures also speed up your dry time though. So if you can luck out and you get a little bit higher temperature and then you can get lower humidity, you're going to dry nice and quick. But somewhere around that 70-degree point is great. Spring projects are fantastic indoors. Obviously, it's low odor. Again, you're not going to really have to worry too much about this. And as you saw, I just rolled one coat on and one edge. I'm going to lift this guy up out of the way, move it down over here onto my horses, and bring the next board in right away. I will start to run out of space, so at some point here, I'm gonna have to move these cans that I've got set up just to show you guys the process. But once I do that, we'll jump into the time lapse again, just show you guys getting 20 of these boards done as quickly as possible, right? We wanna get one coat on. Like I said, low humidity on a day like today, where I'm at, it's gonna soak up really quickly, dry really quickly. We might be 30 minutes in between the first coat and the second coat. I'll show you what we're gonna do to sand in between though too. It's going to be a real quick sanding with some high grit sandpaper just to knock down any of the bubbles that might be forming, bird's eyes, which we shouldn't have too much because we're going on with a fairly thin coat. You know, it's not a heavier finish. If you do put on your finish too heavy and it takes too long to dry, you can start to pit. See that pitting in the finish, and not something that you want in the finish ultimately. And there you have it, really quick. You guys, I'm going to tell you, it's hard to see on camera, but it's almost drying as fast as I can roll it on. So, all right, we're going to jump into the time lapse so I can move these cans out of the way and just get this stuff burned out really quick for you guys. So I'm just about at that point where I'm going to run out of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys on this next board the application process one more time. And then I'm going to work on moving all these out of the way, get the other stack in here so I can get one coat on them. Once I've got one coat on all of these boards, on both sides, I'm going to show you guys the sanding process. It's a really simple process. It's even easier than when we sanded down the edge banding edges there. It's just going to be a quick hit, knock down any fur that's on there, and then throw a second coat on it. We might get lucky enough that 2 coats does the job. Again, this is a closet that we're dealing with here, right? If this was a custom cabinet project, we'd probably be pushing into 3 or 4 coats. But in this case, we're not dealing with a lot of high traffic. It's mostly clothing and maybe some boxes, some storage, things like that. So in this case, we might be able to get away with 2 coats. We're looking for a main objective of protectability and sealing up that wood. Obviously, the beauty is going to be in the first coat, so we'll be good with that. But let's move on. I'll show you guys this process one last time here. With this polycrylic, or maybe you're using the General Finishes high performance top coat, I'm just going to simply, with a microfiber 6-inch roller, I'm dragging some finish up the ramp of the tray here. I'm pushing it back down as I load up my roller, and then I'm just kind of going to town on it. As you guys saw from the time lapse, you know, it's really just one dip for a half of a board and then the next dip for the next half of the board. So let's get going on this half here and finish this guy off so we can move on. But you can see it's going on quick. The humidity's nice and low today. We're getting kind of lucky. It'll dry up quick. And then I wanted to point out how I finished the edge one last time here. It's kind of important to pay attention to that because if you put on too much, you're going to end up with a bunch of drip marks. I just like to take the roller and just kind of get it rolling along that edge there. You can see it spinning just a little bit. It's not creating such a deep groove in the foam roller itself. Just lightly rolling that on there, getting that application going, and then we can come back and finish off that one edge. We haven't hit the other side yet, so before we get to that side, if we did end up getting drip marks, we can knock it down really quick with sandpaper. If the finish isn't completely dry yet, we can knock it down with our hands even, and then get that first coat on there. So we've got one coat of finish on both sides and the edge of our shelves here. Now it's time that we're going to sand down this coat so that we can apply a second coat. Now we're not talking about sanding all the way through this or knocking these edges down like we did before. This is actually going to be really simple. Just like I talked about those pro packs of sandpaper before, you're going to want to grab some 220 grit. Nothing fancy, not 400. We're not looking for a glass piano finish on here. Again, they're shelves too, right? We wouldn't want something so slippery that the books would be sliding right off of it. In this case, we're going to cut our sheet into quarters and we're just going to do a light dusting. And you guys will actually be able to hear in the microphone the difference in this roughness in about 2 seconds when we knock this coat down. And then we'll apply a second coat. And like I said, I think we'll be able to get away with just 2 coats. Applying that second coat will be a little bit heavier, but it's not going to be soaking into the wood. And so it's going to give a lot more protective buildup. question I get asked a lot is, how do you get the finish to look so good even though you're rolling it on so fast? And my answer to that is simply let the product do the work. Just like you would a power tool, let the power tool do the work. We put that first coat on to let it soak into the grain, really just getting it on as quickly as possible, knowing that we were going to come back, we were going to sand it down, take the fur off of it, so to speak, and smooth it out. This second coat that's going on is just going on to sit on top of a dried, finished first coat, right? So it's not going to be soaking in. This is why it's a little bit more important to pay attention to how much you're putting on, but load up that roller and move that product around. Move it around smoothly. You want to overlap just a little bit as you're rolling. You can see that I'm doing here maybe 4, 5, 6 passes, something like that, with a 6-inch roller on a 12-inch board, right? So we got some good overlap going. We're running it along our edge again, and then we'll finish off one last spot down the end there. But then the product itself is going to just level itself out. It's going to lay out. Pretty low humidity today. You can see a few boards already glistening in the sun, and we're sitting about 70 degrees. So this is pretty optimal conditions for finish work. We're talking about shelves here with a clear coat protective finish. We're not talking about some cherry or walnut stained piece that is going to show all your pigtails if you're using an orbital sander, and we'll get to those finishes in another video. But for this clear coat type of a job, just let the product do the work, whether it's this polycrylic or you're using, you know, the more professional grade waterborne products from General Finishes like their high performance top coat, and they will level out, they'll cure up, and you'll be sitting pretty with nice durable shelves. All right, so now that we got that second coat of finish done, we're gonna wanna hit these with 400 grit sandpaper. I know that seems high and excessive, but really all it is just taking that final finish coat down to the smoothest it can be. You can even hear this just in the sound of the microphone here, the smoothness here versus that little bit of coarse roughness right there. But this is simple, guys. It's just a quick little hit, you know, just running it back and forth. Kind of like I'm dusting a table. That's really all it is, and it's about the same pressure too. Imagine that you just sprayed your kitchen table with some vinegar water or whatever it is that you use to clean your hardwood table, and you're just dusting it off. That's really all it is, and now you can tell how smooth that finish comes out. These shelves are done. They are ready to install. So we're gonna head on over to the closet, get these things installed and show you. A couple of them are gonna be cut to different sizes just because it's a custom fit job, but we'll show you how we're gonna install them. Really simple procedure. And what we're gonna do to secure them, just one little extra bit. Make sure that the shelves don't ever fall down, only the stuff that's put on them. And now we're gonna be dealing with the actual mounting hardware. Like I said, anybody can go through California Closets or any other company and get this stuff readily made for them, but you're doing this yourself, and that's why you came to Warrior House. Now guys, you're gonna jump into Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards or whatever store you got, and you're gonna go back to the shelving section. You've planned this all out before getting to this point, and now it's time to mount this stuff. This is a really simple process. You're gonna mount this top track to the wall. Then there's gonna be another piece, that's your vertical piece, that's gonna mount right into that. Now it's free hanging. Essentially, you could just be done with it at that point. We're not going to stop there though. We're going to make sure that we're anchoring these to as many studs as possible. You'll see that there's plenty of hole options going across the horizontal support track. We're going to get this thing about 8 feet off the ground, and then we'll have our verticals at different lengths depending on what we're doing. In this closet, for instance, this is a storage closet. So there's going to be areas where we're having rollaway carts that are going to go underneath. So stick with me. We're going to jump into this and show you guys how it's done. So we've got our horizontal support across the top here. That's what's carrying the load of this entire project, right? That's the most important piece, just like we talked about in edge banding on the plywood a little bit earlier. You know, the start off is the most important part of that. Well, in this case, that's holding all the weight. You essentially could attach all of these vertical shelf hanging brackets without even attaching them to the wall. You don't want to. I recommend at least every other one of them getting secured into a stud for a little extra stability. But here's the thing. This is a little tip for you guys. When you get across the top, and this brand that we used from Home Depot has holes every 8 inches. So you're just about to hit a stud every 16 inches on center. In the event that you don't, and as you saw when I was securing it, some of them had to go in on an angle and some of them just weren't quite working out. Here's a little tip for you guys. These screws are available at most hardware stores and they almost look like a drywall screw with an anchor kind of built into it. Here's a little bit of a close-up. You can see the very coarse thread on that screw. So when you get everything that you can into the studs, I recommend going back and putting these into the rest of the open holes. And every single one of them that you can. I'm not talking about the verticals, I'm just talking about the horizontals up there. You can use these to stabilize a vertical piece to keep it from swaying back and forth, and that's not a bad idea as well. The one last tip that I'm going to give you on that is you don't want to use your impact drill when you're driving these in. It's going to create an agitation that's going to disrupt that drywall, and that is your substrate that's giving you a little bit of structural integrity. You're going to want to use the regular drill installing these. This rigid, you can see it's got a few different settings on it. Drill setting is where it's at. All right, so it's time to start installing the shelves for the closet system. As you can see, this is more of a storage closet, so we're gonna be using a lot of shelves in here. Probably not what you're doing in your closet, but who knows, maybe you've got 500 pairs of shoes and you want them all evenly spaced. It's always advised to start planning your spacing with a measuring tape and even a level, but then once you kind of get going on that, you'll see that you're able to just kind of count spaces in between. All of our shelves are being installed starting with the 3rd hole from the top, and then we're putting 4 spaces in between, so it makes it a little bit more repetitive but easier to follow as we move through this whole entire space. When it comes to setting up your space, I advise that you start it off on paper. Even a simple sketch is really a good way to speed up your process and make things efficient so that you're not fumbling around with a tape measure and a level for the whole entire day. Let's get back at it. We'll see how it looks when it's done. Slide that back. All right. All right, as you can see, installation is going smoothly, and at this point you're just about done and you're ready to start loading up the shelves, getting some bins in there. One final point I want to make is that for stability and even security purposes, there's a hole in the bottom of most of these hardware supports that you're going to find. Any of the big box stores, right? Home Depot, Lowe's, etc. And that hole is to take a screw. Now we don't have to put a screw in every single one of them, but we do want to secure at least the ends. You know, over here we've got these 8-foot long shelves. We're just going to put a screw, 1 in each end. Give it that little extra stability so that this shelf doesn't slide off of these shelf supports. So we're going to go ahead and finish this thing up. We'll show you the finished product and how you can do this yourself and save yourself a boatload of money, a little bit of time, DIYing your own closet storage solutions.